Our top focus this morning, Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be participating along with Prime Minister Scott Morrison of Australia, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga of Japan and President Joe Biden in the Leaders' Summit of the Quadrilateral Framework in Washington, D.C. on the 24th of September. The Quad leaders will focus on deepening ties and advancing practical cooperation on areas such as combating COVID-19, addressing the climate crisis, partnering on emerging technologies in cyberspace, and promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, here's a ground report by our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal from Washington, D.C. Take a look.
Washington is all geared up for a mega geopolitical event. The first in-person summit of Quad leaders of India, United States, Australia and Japan. The summit marks a major milestone and coming of age for the grouping, which has been in works for some time now. One of the key focus areas in this summit will be the Indo-Pacific vision, which is being backed by India and the US among other countries in the region.
He will participate in the first in-person Quad Leaders Summit in Washington on September 24th. On September 25th, he will address the UN General Debate of the UN General Assembly at its 76th session. While Prime Minister is in Washington, he will also have a bilateral meeting with President Biden. We also look forward to bilateral meetings with other Quad leaders, time permitting, as well as bilateral meeting with some other leaders while he's in New York on September 25th.
United States is the first host of the Quad and President Biden had taken a lead on it early on. White House in a statement reiterated the Biden-Harris administration's priority of engaging in the Indo-Pacific through new multilateral configurations to meet the challenges of the 21st century.
On 12th of March, the Quad virtual summit happened, and the key outcome of the virtual Quad meeting was the vaccine initiative. Under this vaccine initiative, American COVID vaccines will be manufactured in India and they will be financed by US and Japan and logistically supported by the Australians.
A host of issues are on the table for the Quad summit, including maritime security, cyber security, critical and emerging technologies, connectivity and infrastructure, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and climate change. Washington will also see first in-person bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden have spoken 3 times so far and participated in Quad leaders and climate leaders virtual summits chaired by President Biden this year. From Washington, the focus will shift to New York later in the week, where the world leaders are converging for the United Nations General Assembly session. Prime Minister Modi will also address the 76th session of the UNGA.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New York will be addressing the General Assembly. During his speech, he is expected to talk about the UN reforms, about climate change, about the COVID crisis, and perhaps references to the Afghan crisis. But all in all, the visit of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to US very early on in the Biden administration shows the closeness between Washington and New Delhi, a relationship which is seen as the most consequential relationship of this century. With video journalist Neeraj Patel, Siddhant Sibbal for WION in Washington, US.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal live from Washington, D.C. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us. Now, all eyes on the first in-person Quad meeting, also a big focus on the bilaterals between Prime Minister Modi and Joe Biden. Could you just lay out some of the key areas of discussions for us here?
Well, this is a week that will see a lot of high-level diplomatic engagements, whether it is in New York or whether it is here in Washington. From the New York, we will expect a lot of statements by the leaders. But as you asked on the bilateral meeting and, of course, the Quad meeting as well, the bilateral is the first in-person meeting between the US President and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, even though both have spoken to each other 3 times and have participated in 2 key events. One, of course, was the climate change event hosted by US President Joe Biden. Then, of course, the virtual Quad meeting. The meeting, of course, between the two sides will take place in the White House. Behind me is the building where the meeting will take place. But the key focus areas will be regional and global issues expectedly. And, of course, how both countries can work together. There can be convergences when it comes to the commonalities between the two countries, how both countries can work together in sectors from space to defense.
Right.
Of course, people-to-people engagement is something that is at the heart of this relationship. We know that the Indian-American diaspora plays a key role in America. They're part of the Biden administration. And the big focus, of course, will be on Indo-Pacific vision.
Right.
India and Washington both strongly back it. And it comes at a time of the aggressiveness shown by the Chinese in the region, in Asia, and with the US as well. With India, of course, the line of actual control incident is something that has left a deep scar in the relationship between New Delhi and Beijing. But nonetheless, it will shape the future course of this relationship, a much celebrated relationship, a relationship that has evolved over last many presidency, from Obama presidency to Trump presidency to now the Biden administration's presidency. And the meeting comes very early on in the Biden administration's tenure, just 7 months into the administration. And
right.
in last 7 months, we have seen increased high-level engagement, whether it's the foreign secretary, the U.S. Secretary of State visiting New Delhi, the Defense Secretary visiting New Delhi, the climate envoy John Kerry visiting New Delhi 2 times. In fact, he was in Delhi just last week.
Right, Siddhant. Now, another important area of discussion here. Now, I know you touched on this briefly earlier. This all is happening in the backdrop of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. We are expecting some references. What can we expect on that front, if there is any clarity on that yet?
Well, Americans might have left Afghanistan, but India cannot leave Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a close neighbor of India. India has invested heavily in terms of infrastructure projects in Afghanistan, and India has highlighted it many times. Afghanistan, the developments in Afghanistan is a concern for both countries. In fact, the biggest worry for New Delhi is that Afghanistan should not become a safe haven for international terror groups and particularly the Pakistan-based international terror groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed. And India, of course, was the president of the UNSC when a key resolution was passed on 30th of August. This resolution talks about Afghanistan not becoming a safe haven. And remember, while India is a non-permanent member of the UNSC, US is a permanent member, the P5 member, and both countries have been engaging with each other on Afghanistan at the multilateral organization, and of course we know at various bilateral meetings as well. But nonetheless, the worry over Afghanistan is a big focus globally, especially under the new Taliban regime. We know just last week the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he addressed the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, the hybrid summit that took place. He addressed virtually, and he clearly set out the red lines for New Delhi, that this is a government that has come about through a process which is not inclusive. It has no representation of women, no minorities as well, particularly the Hazara minorities, while there is one Tajik member in the cabinet. So this is a worrisome development, especially on security front for New Delhi. Emergence of any kind of instability means a threat to India, and India has been highlighting it with various partners, even with Russia. We know the Russian security advisor was on a visit to New Delhi very early on after the Afghan crisis, and now this high-level engagement between the two sides undoubtedly will focus in a major way when it comes to Afghanistan.
Right, Siddhant. All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all those updates. We will continue to track this closely, of course, with you there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.